Welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Amy Canavan and Colin Watt for the ACSOM Bulletin. Welcome back to the show, guys. How are you?
Doing all right, yeah.
Doing good.
Good stuff. Now, Amy, you're going to have to fill us in on developments with your other team being the team that you do media duties for, because you are on media duties for Bonnyrigg Rose, who had us all kind of excited in the fairy tale with the Scottish Cup last week. Talk us through that journey.
Oh, it's been a mental week, it really has. I think the most unsurprising thing is we're not surprised by that performance. Anyone who has got any sort of association with the Lowland League knows the standards, and I know last week we were touching on reconstruction and all of that, so I take it, like, obviously with the Colts teams, I see it from the Lowland League side point of view, that if the Colts teams just leapfrogged right in and burst the pyramid system, then it's not like an uproar would happen down here. But yes, it's been one of those ones. It was a strange week. We were supposed to play Bo'ness in the first round on Boxing Day, and then that got postponed again, and then it was supposed to be up at Spartans Park, up at Ainslie Park in Edinburgh on New Year's Day. Then that was deemed unplayable because of the frost. It got chucked back to New Dundas Park. So we played it at home, beat Bo'ness 5-2, and obviously set up the tie with Dundee. Next game day or so, we hear that it's going to be on the telly. So usually for Bonnyrigg games, I do commentary with my partner Sean McGill, who's absolutely outstanding in what he does as well. So we were like, oh, we might get Liam McLeod and Billy Dodds out of a job. That didn't happen. So we were sort of thinking, we could maybe get like a red button sort of thing up, and we could be an option, but that never happened. So then we got to go up to Dens Park on Saturday. First time I've been up there, never been up there with Celtic or anything like that. So 93 minutes of nerves, especially after that first penalty. I was sort of thinking, oh my God, we could get Celtic in the next round. All these things going through our heads, and then it was just a sucker punch. And then obviously extra time, went ahead again, thought we would do it. And then boys were just dead on their feet. So spoke to Mark Weir, the goalkeeper, who's just been the most talked about player in Scotland all weekend, which is quite nice. It's not a Celtic player. So I spoke to him on a podcast yesterday, on Bonnyrigg Rose podcast, and speaking to Kieran McGackie, the striker of the day, the Lewis Capaldi lookalike. So the boys are all just still buzzing. He's like, I can't walk through the street without getting Capaldi mentioned. So fair play to them all. But it's a tough one now, because we were supposed to be, Paul, you'll know, Kelly Hearts, we were supposed to be playing them last night in the league, but then obviously we're cancelled for 3 weeks. No doubt thanks to a little trip to Dubai. So
Exactly.
It's sort of having to mull over the Dundee result for a few weeks, but it's not a bad one to end it on. All the attention's rightly on Robbie Horn and his men. So it's been a good weekend.
No, it was brilliant. And I think what happens, obviously we're aware a wee bit more of teams like Harrington and Bonnyrigg because of some of the people that are involved in the operation. So you do, you wish them the best and you keep an eye on that. And when I tuned in, I didn't watch the full game, but when I tuned in and they were 1-0 up in the dying minutes of the game, I just thought, wow, this is what the Scottish Cup's all about. But you bring up a great point. So let's start on that point before we go into all the other issues that we're going to be discussing. When like Colin and I or anybody else on the Celtic podcast, Amy, are talking about, yes, let's introduce the Celtic coach team in because it's good for Celtic, it's good for youth development. I've got to admit, I'm guilty of not really thinking about teams that are lower down in the pyramid. I mean, when a team like Bonnyrigg Rose sees that Celtic and Rangers are trying and pushing for coach teams to go into the league, what is your take on it? Not on your Nelly, or get them in on the bottom tier of the pyramid system? I mean, what would your thoughts be from that kind of level?
Not on your Nelly. It's one of those ones that if they are going to come in, they've got to go right to the very bottom. And I know there'll be a few Celtic fans that aren't happy with that, but it's one of those ones that the pyramid system's tough enough to get into as it is. Brora won the Highland League last year and Kelly won the Lowland League last year, but they got no chance at League Two, obviously, because of the coronavirus and whatever. So you're looking at sort of teams around the bottom of League Two, like your Brecons and whatnot. And there's Bonnyrigg, man for man match in Dundee, and that's a top 4 championship side with a Premiership budget. So I don't know. It's one we're quite. Obviously, we see it from the East of Scotland point of view. So I think there was a bracket mentioned last week that it's like Celtic, Rangers, Hearts and Hibs. The thing with Hearts and Hibs is they're very good at loaning their players out. Bonnyrigg have had just before the January there, we had 2 players on loan from Libby and a player on loan from Hearts. And I think that's the next step it needs to be. Instead of these Colts teams just coming in, there's not enough loaning. I know a lot of people don't like loans out, but it's getting experience. They were great additions to the squad, and it's a very competitive level, the Lowland League. I personally think it's the most competitive league in the country. I'm seeing it week in, week out, so I know I'm a bit biased there. But there's big money down there. You've got Barry Ferguson's managing Kelly Hearts. There's big money at East Kilbride. East Kilbride's got, we played them a few weeks ago, and there's Chris Erskine, Paul Payton, Kyle Hutton for Rangers, and Bonnyrigg beat them. And Bonnyrigg got one of the smallest budgets in the Lowland League, sorry. So it's one of those ones, yeah, I would prefer loaning out, but I would certainly, you can't have the Colts teams just bursting right into League Two. But it's one of those ones that if the league want it, and the money's there, so if SPFL teams vote for it, then it's just going to be, and there'll just be more uproar in the Highland League and the Lowland League.
I do have some sympathy, Colin, for that, but I think what Amy says is absolutely right. It's all about money, isn't it? It will come down to money, and having the presence of a Celtic side elsewhere will bring in attendances when people are allowed to go to the games, of course. It will bring more of an attention to particular grounds who may survive on very few fans normally. And I know that it's been trialled. I say trialled, I know, back in the 60s, Jock Stein certainly was sending reserve teams around the country playing second division sides back then, and then showing to the powers that be that this is the impact that taking a team in green and white hoops has on an attendance. So it would be an argument, I think, that would rage on forever. But then again, when it comes to the decision being made, it will come down to money. Would you agree with that, Colin? Even though we are looking at something that's bigger than that, the wider issue is youth development. We want to develop players. An alternative, I guess, would be to have some kind of tie-in with some of the clubs in the lower tiers of the pyramid, whereby they are able to bring in some players, perhaps, for a period of time. I've spoken to Scott at Haddington, Scott Bonner, and he's talking about, when they bring in players from the senior clubs from higher leagues, they're blown away by the standard of the club. The actual stadiums that they're playing in, but also the standard of the games that they're involved in as well, because they're used to playing at under 18, let's say, under 20 kind of level. So what's your thoughts on it, Colin?
So I'd ask Amy the question. So what is the sort of attendances that you would get at Bonnyrigg at the minute?
Well, obviously, there's no fans. New Dundas Park can hold, put me on the spot, I think it's 2,600. I think it's something like that. And obviously, you just need to look over the ties last year. So in the Scottish Cup played Bucky Thistle, again, that was on the telly, and you're exceeding these numbers. Like many of these grounds, you can maybe sneak in, maybe where you shouldn't. I've done that before. So it's one of those ones. I think because
you've just threw somebody under the bus there. I have.
I've thrown myself. It's okay. I've had to admit that to the club. They were like, "Oh, you've been to these games. I don't remember giving you a ticket for that." I'm like, "Oh, oops, jumped the fence." So it's there's big numbers there, and there is, and because it's Bonnyrigg Rose or it's East Kilbride or it's the Spartans Uptown, they do have all the little towns or little local clubs, so the support would be there. And if we were playing at Dundee, playing at Dundee at the weekend there, and if the fans were in, easily would have brought up 2,000-3,000, because it wouldn't just be a regular attendance. It would obviously, and you'd get the add-ons as well, and the so-called fans and whatnot. But you would just go up for the occasion. So it's an interesting one. The gate the seats is obviously a massive thing for Lowland League clubs more than anything right now in the lower leagues. So I struggle to see why the pyramid system couldn't be a little bit easier to get into. But it's just one of those things that it's not just my opinion there. So
so then the question comes about, Paul, when we talk about putting these Colt teams into League 1 and League 2, why not put them into the Lowland League and make them work their way up?
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying, it's like Hibs and Hearts.
Listen, I think it's a good suggestion. I really do. I think that what would also happen there is you would be, if you're looking at the financial element of that, Colin, there's a huge amount of Celtic fans who go to the home games. It will be the same with Rangers, Hibs, and I think it was Hearts, did you mention, Amy, who were thinking about this. Aberdeen, I would be surprised if they weren't looking at it as well. So they don't always go to the away games, but they might want to go and see Celtic in any case. So if you go to even lower down the pyramid, if we call the whole thing the pyramid, then you're going to be looking at the money and the financial element of that filtering in at a lower level, which is great for the game. So I think Celtic might say that it's all about the standard of opposition, but then again they might get a fright because you've just watched Bonnyrigg Rose take it to the wire against Dundee. So I don't think you can disrespect that level of football, and it would be it certainly would be interesting, wouldn't it, if you were coming back after the lockdowns and there was, and I know they do it in Spain, they do it in other countries, it's been particularly successful there. I just think we're moving into, and we're going to be speaking about this, it's all about planning now. We're planning for the future. There's no way that we should try and put a sticking plaster on this season in January by throwing money that probably would be an ill-advised move anyway at new signings or loan deals, Colin, to try and salvage something from the campaign. And it's all about planning for next season. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that Celtic need to, they're going to have to on Saturday, of course, play a number of young players who wouldn't normally get a game. But, it's all about maybe picking the 2 or 3 who have impressed over the 2 games and making sure that they're in and around the first team squad for the rest of the season and trying to develop that. So it's all part of that same argument. How do we develop these players who ordinarily would be nowhere near the first team? I mean, Stephen Welsh, I think, was one of the better performers on Monday night. And I just think that previously he's coming at the side and then he's been dropped for months after that. He was just dropped right out the squad, and that's not developing a footballer. What is he doing from the performances that he made against Rangers and AC Milan to now against Hibs? He's doing nothing as a footballer.
Well, that's the thing for me. I mean, for putting these Colt sides into, say, for example, the Lowland League, and giving them the chance to play against, as Amy quite rightly said, top professionals that are now coming towards the end of their career. You're looking at guys like Paul Payton that you've mentioned before. You look at the Celtic Hearts side; they're full of players that have got lots of experience playing in the Championship and the Premier League. And what I noticed from watching the Celtic game the other night was there's a boy there with a lot of talent in Cameron Harper, but he's clearly not played a professional football game before. He's never been loaned out. And you see it when he's one-on-one with the goalkeeper. Instead of looking up, squaring it back, Tom Roderick's got the tap in. His instinct is what is carried through youth football is if you get the chance to shoot, because you never know when you're going to get it again. At least if he's got that experience of having been loaned out before, then whether it be against Lowland League sides or against teams in League 1 and League 2, it helps him develop as a player.
So would it be safe to say, and by the way, I'm not going to criticise any of the young guys. I know that the Facebook page, which is monitored by Colin, there was maybe some comments around the youth players. I'm not going to criticise any of the youth players that performed on Monday under the circumstances or otherwise. But do you think that comes down to then, Colin, the fact that they're going to hit a point where there is no further development in playing against kids their own age. So when Cameron Harper gets that opportunity, and although it's an angle, he's on one-on-one with the goalie. He's only the goalie to beat, and he kind of, he just panics. He just does. He's got an instinct rather than having that game knowledge that had he been introduced to the side earlier, then he would have had far more experience and he would have had far more knowledge of the teammates around about him and the expectations of what you would tend to expect from someone in that position. Now, I said it when Welsh was drafted in against Rangers. I remember the team being leaked the night before the game. And I thought there was no chance that Welsh would play. He'd only played one game previously, if I'm right, against Hamilton Accies at Celtic Park the previous year. Now, that young player should never be going into a Celtic Rangers game having played one game. There are opportunities to give them game time if they're in the first team squad, Colin. And I think it's been bad squad management because we've had the blinkers on, as a football club, we've had the blinkers on. And what's suffered, I think, is the youth element to that. So it was refreshing, even though the circumstances certainly were not, to see so much youth players playing on Monday night. I want to talk about that because I think originally I said there was 9, but counting back, there was 10 players under the age of 22 that turned out for Celtic. Dembele at 17 being the youngest, and Henderson 20, Turnbull 21, Harper 19, Okoflex 18, Johnson 21, Frimpong 20, Welsh 20, Hazard 22 and Sorrow 22. Now, I'm not going to say that they're all going to have a fledgling career or a long career at Celtic, but from that group of 10 you would expect 2 or 3 of them to stick, wouldn't you? Who were you most impressed with, Colin? Let's take Sorrow and Turnbull and probably Frimpong away from that because we're quite familiar with those guys. Who were you most impressed with on Monday night?
I was actually quite impressed with Stephen Welsh. I thought he had a very good game at centre-half. He took a bit of time to break into the game. He kind of took 15, 20 minutes to get into the game. And then he started winning these headers. He started distributing the ball well. At times when I looked at Shane Duffy's performance, he took a bit of time to get into it as well. But you're hoping that he's the sort of calming influence alongside Stephen Welsh. And I don't know. I think Welsh has certainly done enough for me to still be in and around the squad. I thought it was quite detrimental to him, the fact that guys like Nir Beaton were getting picked ahead of him when Stephen Welsh is a natural centre-half. And Nir Beaton is obviously a midfielder that's dropping back. Looking out for the rest of the team, I thought Henderson played well when he came on. I'd quite like to have seen the likes of Barry Coffey given the chance, or Luca Connell coming off the bench. Cameron Harper, I was expecting probably a bit more from. I thought he would come on and do really well. Amy's laughing because we discussed this already. We thought that Cameron Harper would have a good game.
No, I said you would. You rattled on about him for a week.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's definitely done it at the youth team level, but yeah. I mean, it was you're putting him in against a team that are arguably the third best side in Scotland. They will finish third this season. They were pretty much at full strength, and we put it aside, which is probably, if you'd said that team at the start of the season, you'd expect them to be going to play a team for a testimonial. It's not the team that you'd put out to play a very important league match. One of the main things for me, though, was not having a proper striker up front. I know Mikey Johnson and Cameron Harper sort of switched the positions round, but I thought that not having that striker up there meant that we couldn't hold the ball up, we couldn't connect and build the play together. And at times, Johnson seemed a bit lightweight in that position. He was going down, winning a lot of free kicks, but he wasn't building up the play. And I don't know what you do for the weekend, because it's going to be the same scenario again. Do you recall Afalabi from Dundee? Do you try and get a striker in before the weekend? What's the scenario there?
Now, Colin, a couple of things. First and foremost, yes, Amy rightly said that you'd been flying a flag for Cameron Harper for some time. There's no way we can write him off after one game. I mean, I was impressed with his movement. I thought that, he moved really well. He went down the flanks. He was trying to stretch the back line. So all this stuff off the ball, I thought he did that very, very well. You've got to give a player more than one game before you can, evaluate his performances. But the point you made there about a striker, I'd ask you the question, Colin, why don't we have a striker? I think it's bad planning. No, I think it's bad planning. Because why would, right, if you're talking about bubbles and then bubbles within bubbles, etc., because there's always a risk. You're in Dubai. If us three went to Dubai, there's a good chance one of us would get the virus, right? There's a good chance of it. So what you do is us three are in a kind of micro bubble. Does that mean that it's all right? Just leave the strikers all to, associate with each other. That's not a problem. If one of them gets it, they're all going to be missing the game. That's kind of obvious. That's bad planning, if you ask me. And it's not just an opportunity for me to have yet another dig at the club. I'm pretty sure there'll be a few more to come in the broadcast. But I just think that's part of the issue. It's bad planning. I mean, even if you're going on a school trip, they would plan it better.
I mean, obviously, this has now came down to who was sitting on whichever team bus, because they do the two minibuses, and the ones that were on one minibus have had to self-isolate, and the ones that weren't, they were the ones that were able to play. So yeah, you're right. Why, when you've only got 4 strikers, would you put them all together? I mean, it's not as if the 4 of them's all going to play together. You should really separate it, A team and B team, without trying to tell the players that's what you're doing. It is a real shame that we don't have a natural striker, especially getting into this game against Livingston at the weekend, when you're hoping that you're going to have the vast amount of possession, Okay, Livingston are on a really good run at the minute, but you're at home. They're the team that's probably going to sit in, ask you to break them down, and at the minute, what have you got to hold the ball up front? There's nothing there.
No, I take your point, but I must admit, I don't think the club will be doing any business to try and bring anyone in, even on an emergency loan. I just think we're in that period now of the season where there's a real resignation. Wish there had been a few more resignations, but there's a real resignation to the fact that the season is over, and there's no way they're going to try and bring someone in to play up front, knowing that another 4 strikers are going to be available for the next game. So I think we'll just continue as we did on Monday night. Now, as disappointing as it was, I think a great deal of credit has to go to the youngsters. I mean, Stephen Welsh spoke about the kind of panic of everything that was happening, the tests coming back. No one knew if they were going to be positive or not in terms of the initial tests, and then the isolation, throwing that team together, including the management side. So I'm going to come to yourself, Amy. Who were you most impressed with? You know, if there was 2 or 3 of the young guys that you think might stick this season, who would it be?
For me, it was Welsh as well. I know that's just a bit boring, but I'm not going to. I think Cameron Harper was expecting better from himself. I think he was getting too frustrated too quick. And he just I think you just wanted them to relax a little bit more. I think he felt like he was carrying pressure. I think that's a little bit worrying in itself as well, because there should be no pressure on his shoulders, no weight on his shoulders. It should be the likes of Mikey Johnson and Cal McGregor who is carrying that weight. For him, he should have just enjoyed it, but it didn't look like he enjoyed it at all. There was no. I think he did sort of play with a little bit of panic, a little bit of frustration. So I hope he sticks in and around the team, so he purely can get experience and the nerves can sort of settle. Stephen Welsh, I think, just strolls right in and just looks the part. Like say, you'd sort of look at the back and think, who's leading who between him and Duffy? I thought Duffy played okay. Don't think it was one of his worst performances, but I think that definitely helped that he had a commanding figure like Welsh beside him. I thought Welsh was really vocal. Sort of kept Frimpong in check a little bit as well. I think Frimpong was a little bit more defensive than he's ever been, and I think that definitely helps having Welsh beside him. I think he was sort of dictating for him to be back. You saw him having to like chaperone basically Diego Laxalt, and that's a player who's AC Milan World Cup finals or whatever, God knows how. But you look at Welsh there, and I think he looked almost the most commanding and the most comfortable out of that back 4, and he's arguably got the least experience. So yeah, for me, it was definitely Stephen Welsh.
I noticed that. I was really impressed with the fact that he was organising Laxalt at the corner kicks, etc. Amy, because we certainly do need to be organised when it comes to set pieces. We all know the poor record that we've got. You made a comment there, just a throwaway comment about Laxalt, but I think it was a very good one, because what I'd like to ask, I'll come to yourself first of all, Colin, about Laxalt, is about the regression. I think what we had in the first, and by the way, I do realise that, you know, what I would say is it's difficult if you go into a situation to be the star man every week if there's some kind of malaise within the team. But Laxalt seemed to perform well during that period we were going through the 2 wins in 12. And now, 6 games before the Rangers match, and this is where he seems to have lost his form, Colin. What would be your kind of take on that? Is he, as Frank McAvenny said in the press over the last few days, a better defender than Taylor? I know Taylor divides opinion on the ACSOM kind of panel. What's your thoughts on Laxalt? Do we invest in a player like that at the end of the season would be another question that I would ask you. I just feel that there seems to be a regression in his performances since he joined the club.
I think I said it last week. When he came into the team, he started to play the way that he knew how to play football. It was in his mindset that he would drive the ball forward. He would... It was like his first thought was to get forward. He was kind of throwing himself into tackles. He was, and he had a great game in the Europa League. But when he sort of fitted into the culture that Celtic play, and he started to play the same sort of game plan that Celtic play, it's too slow for him. Like, when you look at Celtic's build-up, it was so slow. It was pass, pass, pass. Whereas he's so... he's just built that mindset where he has to get forward at the first opportunity that he gets to put the ball over. Mm-hmm. And then when he's on the back foot, I don't think he is as good a defender as Greg Taylor. I think if you've got to pick one of the two of them to play as a left back and not a left wing back, then Greg Taylor's your option. I don't think Greg Taylor would have given away the foul that led to the Hibs goal. And by the way, if that was like Ryan Christie or someone like that gave away that foul, I'd be screaming as much as what I did when Salt gave it away. That was just terrible game management. You've got to learn to see out games, and that's another one that we've lost because of that, or we've lost the points because of that.
There was also the point raised, Amy, of the lack of strikers, and it was a concern that Colin raised earlier on. I was more concerned with the lack of width, because we get up to that last third and then we hit a brick wall, and we're relying on long range efforts. We've seen a few getting drilled in from Sorrow and Turnbull, for example. Turnbull scored a superb goal from the free kick. I was far more concerned with the lack of width. Would you not be maybe looking at some of these players to give us a wee bit of width? I mean, Dembele can play wide. Luke O'Connell, we've not really seen much of him, Colin, but I can understand why people are calling for him to come in. Can we not maybe try and utilise these players out wide? And also, on that note, I felt Mikey Johnson did spend far too much time on the deck. He was bringing back to mind the issues I had with Lewis Morgan, because that's all he ever seemed to do is get knocked off the ball. Obviously, there's been a long time of recuperation for Mikey Johnson. Is he up to it physically?
I don't know, it's one of those ones, like you say, I think he needs to be careful. He will create a reputation for himself. He spent a lot of time on the deck on Monday night. Again, I don't know if he felt he was carrying a fair bit of weight there on his shoulders, that he was one of the more experienced in the side. But it's just, I don't know, I think he was very narrow. Going back to your point about width, it's extremely worrying. And it's time and time again, though, it just shows you, I know we're talking about the different side, but just how much we are missing James Forrest. I think it's crazy how little's been mentioned, how much we're actually missing him amongst fans. Laxalt for me is one of those ones that I know people talk about, like his attacking sense. I feel when he goes attacking, he's so narrow. You're talking about width there. He's always in the box. I think I think it was maybe Mikey Johnson was on the wing and he was looking for an overlap and run. And you look at Diego Laxalt and he's hovering over the penalty spot. And then he trudges back as well. So there is a lack of width because there's just nobody offering overlapping runs. And that's on both wings. Jeremy Frimpong can tank it down to the byline, but he is looking for a James Forrest, or he's looking for somebody, sometimes even a Ryan Christie. And there was just nobody there at all on Monday. There was so much space. So yeah, I felt both Laxalt and Johnson were cutting in too quick. I quite like the diamond in midfield. It definitely helps for Sorrow and Turnbull, but it does obviously sacrifice our width. So it's going to be interesting when James Forrest does come back into the fold, whenever that may be. And as much as the diamond is beneficial, we definitely I don't know if you're looking for then your two top strikers, if it's Griffiths and Edouard up top. Obviously, they are a bit quicker and a bit better at going out to the wings, and that comes with experience. But there definitely does need to be something there because the width is it is a major issue, you're right.
You know, I'm not going to say I told you so or anything, but early in the season I was saying to Colin that we needed a striker coach, and the big thing with that is people come back, what's the coaches doing? Because they're meant to coach your defenders, your strikers, your midfielders, and I get all that, but I just felt that from top to bottom, Celtic certainly do not produce strikers. We don't produce goal-scoring strikers, and I threw it out there, who is the last goal-scoring Celtic striker? Prolific. And I think there was a few thrown in, people like Craig Beattie. I wouldn't say he was prolific or over a period of time. Sean Maloney started off in that position, but he certainly didn't play many of his games as an out-and-out striker and a goal scorer. James Forrest came in, scored a lot of goals, but he's not a striker. He's not a centre-forward. And I think the last player that we produced was Jerry Craney. Before your time, Amy. Jerry Craney in the 90s was probably the last goal-scoring striker that Celtic produced, and the one before that was Charlie Nicholas, and he left in 1983. So the point was all about, going back to the very first point we made on this show, all about the youth kind of aspect of Celtic and developing players. But at the same time, seasoned pros can be coached and they can be taught, and I just feel that we're very one-dimensional if Edouard and Griffiths are not in the team in terms of stretching. And by the way, I think a lot of what Edward does is kind of narrow and straight down the middle. Mm-hmm. But, if you had someone coming in, because I'm not for a moment saying he should be coming back in, but Larsson was the name I mentioned, Colin, and people scoffed at that. You've got to be, you've got to have the talent before you have the affiliation to the club, and I understand all of that. But that was just an example that I gave of someone that surely could teach players like Klamala, players like even a Yeti, as I say, a seasoned pro, a way to play in a system that suits the club. Because at the moment, I don't think we've got that adaptability, and that showed on Monday night. Even though we had a lot of kind of strikers out, the way that we failed to stretch that back line, and that's where I would give Cameron Harper a bit of credit. I know he's had a bit of stick, but I thought that he stretched the back line better than anybody else on the night. We're going to get back to the coaching staff and all that, because obviously the headline today is the time is now to plan for next season. We alluded to that yesterday. The question, I guess, would be what order does that happen in? And I'm now of the view that the reason we're not replacing the manager and coach is because there are other moves afoot higher up the tree, and whoever's coming in will want to be part of the recruitment process. But it's interesting that we've had what I would call the Banner and Pat Bonner, the Banner and the Bonner, both coming out to say that the club should, on Bonner's assertion, apologise to the fan base, and the Banner saying you can't hide forever. We've received absolutely nothing from the club in terms of engagement. Jimbo 2167 is asking club statement today, even if it is a statement. You know, it's a one-way piece of, it's not even engagement, it's a one-way piece of communication. Colin, where do we stand with this? What do you think, if any, the plans are for the board at this moment in time to try and repair the damage, not only with the fans, but, you know, I just think that there's a lot in Scottish football now looking at Celtic and, you know, with a bit of disdain.
I honestly think Celtic would need someone like Saatchi and Saatchi to come up with a PR campaign to get the season ticket money in next season. The way they've treated Celtic fans this year has been absolutely appalling. I mean, I saw yesterday basically John Paul Taylor was coming out saying that the review is still to take place in January. He expects a statement to be made on it. I wonder if that's potentially what the listener was saying there. If will we see a statement on that? I don't think so. I mean, what has given anybody the idea that that will happen? I mean, there's been nothing that's come out from the club this year that suggests that they're actually going to take on board the fans' views. The last time that Peter Lawwell came out with a statement, and it was to the Celtic Supporters Association. He says, "Oh yeah, we spent £30 million in the summer." That's not something to be proud of, because when you look on the park, you're 21 points behind Rangers. So what's to be proud of spending £30 million? You could spend £100 million and be in the same position. You've wasted that money. So for Celtic to come out and try and get the fans back on board, it's going to be one momentous effort.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, you know, there are still some out there. There's a hardcore who disagree with us about that, and how dare you criticise the club. But I can tell you that from the vast majority of people that we are speaking to, a lot of them are on the fence as to whether or not they're going to renew their tickets, their season tickets. And many of them, Colin, have said they're not. They're simply not going to do it until there's change at the club. Now, I'm going to bring in Patrick. Patrick Murphy comments via YouTube. If you are watching the show on YouTube, please subscribe, because we are producing daily content free of charge. Now, Patrick takes us on to the next section of this debate. We will come back to Peter Lawwell and co in dispatches, I'm sure. The next manager will be a huge indication of where Celtic is going as a club. If it's Ross or Kennedy, it's clear there's no ambition. If it's someone like Howe or Rangnick, there may be hope. Now, it is the key indicator of the level of ambition that these guys in charge of Celtic have got. And that will be shown with their next big move. And the next big move for me is the manager's chair. Now, as I've said before, Amy, I do think that there will be moves afoot. You know, in the boardroom at Celtic, the CEO has been in position now. He's in his 18th year. There's a feeling that he does a lot of things right in terms of the financial element of the club, but his, you know, infiltration into the football side of it has been his undoing, because, you know, there's a legacy when you leave a club, and you wonder to yourself, what will Peter Lawwell's legacy be? Will it be he was the man to blame for 10 in a row?
I don't know. He certainly won't think so. He'll think that he's ran a great business for 18 years or however long he's ran it for, and kept them afloat and done all this and done all that. And yeah, financially, like you say, he has done well. We are a well-run business, and that's what it is. Corporation, whatever you want to call it. is he the man that chucked 10, or do you? I don't. There's a myriad of folk who you could say who chucked 10. God, his legacy. I just don't see him going. I don't see him going anytime soon. I really don't. I just think he's just going to stick around forever. He'll just be somewhere. So I think from my point of view, yeah, he is the man that blew the 10. But then in the same sentence, where you've got to consider, yeah, well, he gave Lennon pretty much all he wanted this year, right? He never got Fraser Foster and maybe never got Ivan Toney, but he still got a striker at the same price. He still brought in a £5 million goalkeeper. So Lawwell himself would be sitting, yeah, well, I've done my part. It's down to you and your staff. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting who gets the label of who shot the 10, but there's definitely a few who could wander around with that tagline.
You're right, and I think there is kind of two parties if you want to split the candidates, and we're making the candidates up. We don't know who the club would like. We don't know who would be interested, but there does seem to be a lot of names coming up time and time again. Eddie Howe, Ralph Rangnick, two names that continually come up. On the flip side, John Kennedy, Jack Ross, and a few others. Colin, if history tells us anything regarding the last two managerial appointments, we will appoint someone who's unemployed to prevent the payment of compensation. Eddie Howe's unemployed, as is Ralph Rangnick. Are we going to go down that route, or are we going to play a wee bit more safe? And I say safe in terms of the way that the club may operate. I don't think it's safe long term when it comes to the cheap option. Someone made a great point. I seen it on social media just yesterday. This is how much the safe options actually cost us. You know, the cheap option. It's cost us a lot of money when you look at the failure to, progress in Europe, the failure to recruit properly. So it actually ends up costing you a lot more, and it's in a false economy. How do you see the board going on this one, if indeed, as Amy suggests, and by the way, I think you're probably right, although I am thinking it would explain why we're not making moves, that Peter Lawwell will be there for next season. Where are we going to go? Are we going down the Eddie Howe stroke Ralph Rangnick route? And by the way, I think they're completely different propositions, but what I'm talking about is unemployed managers. Or will we try and get someone like Jack Ross, or indeed promote from within?
I mean, what I can't wait for is if we don't sign Jack Ross, I can't wait to see Kevin Graham's 60-minute rant that he'll have, because if there was a signing to be made, Kevin Graham would want Jack Ross in as the manager. So that would be a great view. Make sure you subscribe for that one. But no, I think Eddie Howe is probably the option I would go for a number of reasons. He has done really well at Bournemouth on a very limited budget. Limited in terms of the English football game. We know there's a lot of money down there, and Bournemouth have spent a lot of money. They've spent like 20-30 million on players. But in English football, that's next to nothing. That's the kind of difference in levels. People say, what had Brendan Rodgers done before he took over at Celtic? Well, he had the Liverpool job. He took Swansea up to the Premier League. And the fact that Eddie Howe managed to keep Bournemouth in the Premier League on the budget that they had compared to everyone around them, for me, I think is one of the reasons I'd go for him. He's also managed to develop players, something which I don't think that Neil Lennon has done in his time at Celtic since he's came back. I think he did well the first time round, but this time round, he's not brought anybody through. He's not made anybody better. All we keep going on about is how players have regressed. There's not been one player that's came through and you says, well, since Lennon came in, he's been outstanding. He's been the guy that's really took it forward. When I look at the games from last season and compare them to the games of this season, as much as there's no fans there, the football's just different. It's so much different. You see, in last season, we're passing the ball. It was one touch, two touch. We're playing so much quicker. This season just feels so slow. It's as if we're trudging towards the end of the season. And I don't know if that's because of comments that have come out. Jordan Devlin released a fantastic thing for the Athletic saying that half the squad don't realise why the fans are so angry and upset with performances this season, and the other half of the team really think that everything's regressed this season since Lennon's kind of had full control. So it's clear behind the scenes that we do need to make a change, and if you ask me to put someone forward for the job, I would pick Eddie Howe.
Just a couple of things on that point, or those points you were making, Colin. Full control, surely Lenny had full control last season.
I think there was still that kick-on effect. There was still the players that had the kind of good feeling from the way that Rodgers has come in. For how long had Neil Lennon said when he was a temporary manager, "All right, when I get full control, we'll play my style of football." Even at the start of last season, we weren't playing the Neil Lennon or the Lenny ball, as people like to call it. It was still the Brendan Rodgers stuff. As the season started to go on, as we got into December, it became poorer. And then it took for a change in the formation. It took for us to go to the two up front for the season to be turned round. If you remember back to Christmas last year, there was only a couple of points in it at the top of the table. It was only really that period between January and March where we kicked on. And that was never a position that we really found ourselves in under Brendan Rodgers. So you can see the decline since Rodgers left.
The only other thing I was going to ask you in relation to who has come on, who has improved, stroke developed, would you say Frimpong under Neil Lennon? You've got to look at the whole picture, I guess. And last season, although some of it filtered into this season, was a treble-winning campaign under Neil Lennon. Frimpong comes through and impresses. I think this season's been a wee bit patchier for Frimpong. He plays if he's fit. He's been a success under Lenny.
Arguably, yes, but we've all said that Frimpong needs to work on that final ball. How long is it going to take for someone like Frimpong to be coached into putting a final ball over? I mean, you saw the likes of James Forrest. James Forrest under Brendan Rodgers developed his game and started scoring goals. He added goals to his game. He had 20 assists this season. And the way that we're playing at the minute, having Frimpong as that right wing back, that's the sort of things that you're expecting to see from him as well. Maybe not to the same levels, but you're expecting him to come up with a couple of assists. You're expecting him to work on his shooting. And he's just not done that. If it's taken, 12 months, 18 months now that he's been in the first team and he still can't put a ball over, that suggests to me that they're not working hard enough on his progression.
Well, it's one of the things that can be coached. As I said before, he's only 20. He's played a lot of games for Celtic now. You would think that that's maybe a part of his game that they would have ironed out before now. Someone said earlier on the show a week or two ago that is going to make or break whether or not Frimpong takes that step up to the next level. You know, from being a performer or sometimes star performer for Celtic in the Scottish League and taking it to a higher kind of level will be that final ball. You add that to his game and he's a completely different player. He's a more all-rounded footballer. We're going to jump back and forward depending on how some of the comments come in. We're talking about planning for next season. Will the board be the same? Well, Boxer Toy reckons this board will forever be remembered for this season's arrogance and neglect to the supporters. I fear that is the case because it's one of these things that we all understand, all the mitigating circumstances around what happened this season, some of the things we couldn't control, many of them we could, but it was all about, Amy, reacting to that and taking the necessary risk. And the necessary risk would have been, I guess, making a change. Now, Colin Watt wanted it to be done after the Ferencváros game. Anthony from Four Tims, who was on as a guest previous to that, wanted the change made after the Rangers game. I came a wee bit later to the party and I felt that the Aberdeen game at Pittodrie was the final straw for me. Will their legacy be obviously this season rather than previous seasons of success? And really, should the big question mark go around their decision making and their ability to take measured risks, let's say October, November time, when a change could have been made at that point to save the season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing this season that's been determined is just attitude. I think that attitude the whole time is just about everything, with statements, with decisions, with lack of decision making. There's just everything has came back to an absolutely stinking attitude. There's such a disconnect. I don't know. I was trying to write a piece yesterday, and there was just anger. There was just anger because you're looking at all these things and you're thinking, right. I was reading another piece, and they were linking it back to Tommy Burns, and he's like, they're there and they're always there, and God bless every one of them. Many put Lennon in the same bracket as that he had that connection with the fans, and obviously bringing Tommy Burns in it is a big claim, but it's that sort of thing. Like, would you really see that happen now? There's such a deep disconnect with the fans now. This is from a man who is a fan, who is in his 20 years association with the club, Neil Lennon. So it's one of those ones, how could he get it so wrong in his attitude? So you can blame Lawwell's attitude and all of those in the hierarchy, but they just do care about the money. That is plain and simple. That's all that is. And it's a business and they just want it run. And like you say, he'll just be happy that he's kept us afloat during coronavirus, well and truly afloat and doing well. It is that attitude this season. Everything's just wrong. It's the statements. It's the whole Dubai debacle. It's absolutely everything. It's just been a stinking attitude. So one of those that you just, if the shoe was on another foot, you'd be laughing. If it was any other club in the country, you would be laughing. And you've got to take it on, not even have to take it on the chin now, but you just got to accept that this is a laughing stock, and that is the state of Celtic right now. But like I say, I think the comment was about the arrogance and the neglect this season towards the fans. I think it's just the whole attitude of the club and the way that, like you say, the PR. God knows how they're going to try and sell season tickets in the PRs, because that whole department's just a farce. But yeah, I'd pin it all back to attitude. That's what I would do.
I've got to say, just sorry, Paul, just on that, and I think it's already been said on here the other day. Andy Walker on Monday night was absolutely spot on. Everything that he said before the game, you could see the passion coming from him. It's something we've not seen from him in a long time. He was speaking like a proper Celtic fan. And I know you've had the chance to interview him before, and it's this thing that you got out of him was that he is a passionate Celtic fan, but it finally came across, and he was saying everything that Celtic fans had been trying to say. They've been saying on this podcast, they've been saying on social media, and I don't know what it's actually going to take for the board to listen to it. If Andy Walker saying it on Sky Sports isn't going to turn things around, if you saying it on STV News isn't going to turn it around, it just shows they're putting their hands in their ears and they're just going, nah, never happened.
Well, I think, going back to a point Amy made, the point of the ceiling caving in, Colin, will be around season ticket renewals. And I'm keeping that in the back of my mind as being a positive in many respects to force them into making a bold decision. Because if, for example, they're looking at the season ticket renewals and they're coming in and they're dripping in, they're plodding on, to use Gavin Strachan's description of the rest of this season with the figures, then that will make a change happen. Because, as Amy said, all they're interested in is a balance sheet, and therefore if the 54 becomes 34, let's say, then that's a massive issue for the club as a business. So I think that point will be when the bold move is made. Plenty of Celtic fans are saying that that's going to be the case, but until they actually see it in black and white and it's tangible, the club may continue to sleepwalk as they have been doing. Now, a few other names coming in. Matty lad, Wayne Rooney touted for a job in Celtic News Now. I think that story came from Jason Cundy, who, if he told me it was Wednesday today, I would have to check the calendar. So no, I don't think that Wayne Rooney, and people have been citing the Steven Gerrard example of a rookie manager coming in. He's obviously got a wee bit of experience at Derby. I do like the fact that he's a Celtic minded guy. I've seen his name, I've seen Rio Ferdinand's name. No, we're a million miles away from that at the moment. We need not just a manager to come in who is just going to fit the mould that Peter Lawwell wants him to fit. I think we need a manager to have more control, and that's my big concern. When you're looking at the name Ralph Rangnick and you look at what he's achieved and you listen to him speaking about the game, then you think, well, that does encompass a whole change of culture within the football club, whereby certain people will have less control, and that might not sit well with the likes of Peter Lawwell, because Ralph Rangnick will want control over all football matters as far as possible. I mean, obviously there is always collaboration within a football club. You can't have free reign, you can't have autonomy on everything, but he would certainly want more control than what Neil Lennon has at this moment in time. So I tend to agree with Declan O'Kane, who reckons that Wayne Rooney is too much of a gamble. Now let's go back to the banner, because someone did say here, it may have been in the screen above, that the banner may be perceived by the media as a threatening term. The banner actually said, "You can't hide forever." I don't think that was threatening. I just think it's talking about how anonymous the board have been and how lacking in engagement, not only with the fans, but the press are saying the exact same. My chums in the press, Colin, are saying exactly the same in relation to Celtic's inability to actually engage with them. So yeah, that banner, I just feel it's summing up the frustrations of a great deal of Celtic supporters. So if we're talking about the structure, we're talking about going for someone like Ralph Rangnick, because I must admit, that's a name that, would I have considered him before reading through the comments on ACSOM's bulletin? Perhaps I wouldn't. But that's the whole beauty of allowing people to get involved in here, because, they do throw in some names and they give you links to YouTube videos watching his interviews and his philosophy of the game. And what you're getting with him is someone who actually has a plan. He's got a medium-term plan. He would certainly have a 5-year plan on the football side of it. But the big question would be the people in charge, the people with control. Colin, would they be able to allow themselves to ease that control, to allow someone with more authority to come in?
I don't think under the current structure it would. I mean, how many times have we saw over the last sort of 10, 15 years, it's been a case of we were going to try and bring this person in, but it was stopped by our chief executive. I mentioned it on the show last week when we tried to get the Piscini deal done, and he had to turn around and head back after Rodgers kind of put off going on his holiday so that he could get that deal over the line. We saw it where Roy Keane refused to take the job because he was told who his number 2 was going to be. You saw it with Neil Lennon. Neil Lennon has not brought in who he would want as a backroom team. He's been forced to make a partnership up with John Kennedy and then been given Gavin Strachan. So it's not as though there's a full control given to the manager, who should be left to make all the footballing decisions. And I think that'll only change if you do change who is the chief executive. Because as long as Peter Lawwell's in there, he's still going to want to have a say on transfers. He's still going to want to have a say on who is the coaches at Celtic. And if that keeps going on, you're not going to attract the right names. For me, it's one of the reasons that Brendan Rodgers took the Leicester job when he did.
Absolutely agree with that, and that's why we talk about a structural change. And yesterday, trying to be as fair as possible to the power brokers, but I do feel that we're at a point now where the confidence levels among Celtic fans, if you were ever able to do a poll on that, would be grim reading for those in charge. And then people are saying, well, you know what, we've been saying this for a while, the Res 12 guys, and talking about the way that the 5-way agreement was denied by Peter Lawwell, although there is a document to suggest that Celtic had sight of it. And it's just that the success has been masking all of these deficiencies for some time, and I think we're all guilty of that as football fans. Amy, you're winning quadruple trebles, and I think that probably didn't do the Rest 12 guys any favours, because if we were going through a period of flux, for example, when they were really pushing for that, I think they might have got much more of a support. Will they pull a rabbit out the hat?
Wow, no idea. Nothing would surprise me. If they do, wow. I really have no idea. I think it's sort of like watching, I don't know, it's like I don't know, you can't get to the cinema now, so you just watch Celtic Football Club, because nobody could write this. Like Tarantino, nobody could write a script like this. I have no idea what the next twist is going to be. I think, and sorry, skipping away, but as I said, I know you think maybe Lawwell won't be there next season. I really wouldn't be surprised if he is. Like, it's one of these ones, I wouldn't even, right now, I probably wouldn't even be surprised if Lennon was still there next season. It's just everything right now. There's just so many, it's just, you just sort of shrug now. There's no shock, there's no surprise. And I think the biggest thing coming in all these ones is that why would anybody want the Celtic job? There is nothing to be, and I mentioned it last week, and I think I got a fair bit of stick, like already going, oh, there's still this, the league's still on or whatever. Why would you want to come to Celtic right now? Why would anybody want? Like, we're mentioning Eddie Howe, Rafa Benitez, and all like that, but what's so attractive?
I think the question's been asked actually in relation to Eddie Howe, and someone who worked with him at Bournemouth has been quoted as saying that it's still a proposition, with the fan base, should they all be there, with the European football, with the ability also to turn the thing around. I mean, we were winning, which, as I say, masked a lot of problems, but to turn the whole operation around, the football side of it, that kind of challenge might appeal to some of the guys out of work? Why would you leave a big job to come to what is still a big job? Yeah, take your point. Why would you, if you think at the moment this club looks like a bit of a basket case? And let's be honest, it does from the outside looking in, which we all are. No one is on the inside, and that's the problem. We're all on the outside. We're getting kept here by Harris fencing. So from the outside looking in, who would want a job like Celtic? I think it would be a challenge for someone like Eddie Howe, someone like Ralph Rangnick to come in, put their stamp on, and turn it round. I mean, I asked the question before. There's been 3 9 in a rows achieved in Scottish football, and in between those 3, what was the longest period of domestic domination in terms of league title wins? And it's 3. And I asked the question, is this the pendulum swinging over Ibrox way for another 3 years? Because you would hope not. I mean, it's hard at the moment, actually. It would be hard for you to predict that, because I guess that there are going to be plenty of changes at Rangers also. You know, if you come up here with the domination that Celtic have had, and you break that domination, which Rangers are in the process of doing, your stock levels are through the roof. Also, allied to that, the European performances. So yeah, there will be changes on that side of the city. But I think it all depends on what we do. I really do think it all depends on what Celtic do. The squad we had was supplemented by another 6 players, 3 of whom will still be here because they're still our players. Did we lose anyone that weakened the squad? Amy, you've already mentioned Foster. Yeah, I think everybody will agree with that. But, you know, we kept all the other players, so we do have a strong squad. And that was partly the reason why we could still put out a decent enough team on Monday night, was because of the depth of the squad, which I don't think has been utilised as well as it should have been. So I still think it's a proposition that there are plenty of managers out there would be interested in the Celtic job. But I do think that those in charge will be looking to go for an unemployed manager, of which there are loads. There are plenty of unemployed managers out there who would be interested in coming to speak to Celtic. It's not as though it's a low-paid job, is it? You know, Neil Lennon gets a handsome wage. If you want to compare his annual salary to the annual salaries in Serie A, for example, Neil Lennon is paid handsomely. Now, we are going into a game this weekend. Let's talk about football for a bit. We're going into another game. We're going to have access to the same players. I'm not aware of any additional injuries presently. So, Colin, talk to me about your preview of Livingston. Do you think we will stick to, as close as possible, the starting lineup that we've seen against Hibs?
I think there might be a couple of changes. Obviously, we saw Scott Robertson's coming back from Gillingham. He played really well down there for the first half of the season. I think he impressed quite a few people on the live games for the Carabao Cup, and he's played quite well. He's probably going to come in. I think he's probably going to come onto the bench, and you'll see either Barry Coffey or Luca Connell drop out for him. I wouldn't be surprised to see Karamoko Dembele getting a start. I think you were right. We do lack the width out there, and we can't really play this stand formation when we've not got 2 strikers. So we are going to have to change up the formation. Yes, it worked really well for Sorrow and Turnbull, and they've come in and they've been really impressive in that sense. But when you've not got the 2 strikers, you've got to change and work with the squad that you've got. Are we going to have a striker in before Saturday? I don't think we will. So what happens? Do you go with Mikey Johnson up front again? I don't think he can hold the ball up. Who else have you got? Cameron Harper. Again, he looked better on the wing than what he did coming through the middle. Armstrong Okoflex came off the bench. When he's been playing for the reserve side, he's been playing as the striker. The reserve side actually play a different formation to the first team. They go with a 4-3-3, and you've got Dembele, Harper and Okoflex normally, and they sort of change around where they play. It's quite a fluid system. When they come into the first team, we're obviously playing with 2 up front. We've not got that. When it's 1 up front, they've also not got that option. So what happens? Do you bring in Afolabi back from Dundee? I don't think he's even ready to start against Livingston. So you are going to have to change the system up. I think we'll probably play with a 4-5-1. And if that's the case, Robertson could probably come back into the side. Who would I start up front? I would probably give Mikey Johnson another chance.
And Livingston are on a good run of form, Colin. Do you think Celtic can get back to winning ways after 2 games without a win?
Do you know what? If it wasn't for game management, Celtic would have beat the 3rd best team in Scotland on Monday night with a full strength team. They would have beat Hibs, but for the game management, we conceded in the last couple of minutes. Livingston are on a fantastic run of form. They'll probably come in and set up to defend, and we'll have to break them down. With the team that we've got, I'm not sure how well we'll be able to do that. But it's up for the boys now to come in and stake their claim and make that jersey their own. You saw what happened when Ismail Assoro and David Turnbull came in. Now they're undroppable from that side. It's up to these guys who are sitting around the kind of fringe of the squad to come in and say, well, you missed your chance, I took it, I scored a goal, come and take that jersey off me.
And Amy, what's your thoughts about Saturday? We're coming up against a team that has plenty of confidence and momentum. And obviously at the moment, we've got something to prove. The young kids that have come in, I call them kids because they're kids to me, that are coming into this team, will get another bite of the cherry. So how do you see Saturday going against Livy?
I don't know, it's a really tough one. Probably the last stage you'd want to be facing with such a depleted squad. They're on a great run. I think as Colin said, I don't see there being too many changes from Monday. I think continuity is important. It's not like these guys are going to be in the team for the coming weeks, like you say, unless they make a big impact like Sorrow or Turnbull. I think what Colin said there's a bit interesting, that obviously the reserves play a different system to us. I don't know, do you take the risk and play to their strengths, as in that you maybe try the 3 of them up top? I know then you're probably dropping Mikey Johnston, but does more confidence come from Harper if he's got Oko Flights and Dembele in the system that he's used to playing? That's a massive risk, obviously, because then you're sort of mucking about with the guys behind you, your experienced guys in Sorrow and Turnbull, and you don't obviously know how that fits them in. But a 4-3-3 could work. You could have McGregor, Turnbull and Sorrow behind them. I understand that's obviously dropping Johnston. You want Johnston to get game time. It's all if buts and maybes. But that's interesting for Colin, that obviously that is what the normal front three is at the reserves. I don't know. I really like Scott Robertson. I'm quite excited to see him come back. I don't know how much he'll feature this season, but I said that last week as well. This has to be like a building period now. So I would like to see him in the setup. I think he's got a great stature about him. I think was it the Cluj game he played? Was it the Dead Rubber Cluj game in Europe? And I thought he was really, really impressive. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just like you say, it's just going to be one. Hopefully, Stephen Welsh was a good game, but yeah, win's obviously vital. But I quite like the idea of maybe playing that front three of what you would see at the reserves. I think that's quite exciting.
Well, there we go. Can Gavin Strachan extend his managerial reign for 2 games without defeat? Who knows? We will be here every day leading up to that, and we'll be covering the game as well. Thanks everybody for the comments coming through. We obviously are keeping a close eye on any infiltrators so that everyone can enjoy the chat in the chat room as well as on the broadcast itself. All that's left for me to say, Amy Canavan and Colin Watt, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Take care, guys.